So you have to take people on a journey when you do change, especially in the hotel space, especially any space that involves other people when you're dealing with actual customers that you see face to face. There's a bit of thing with the world in general and technology, especially if it's working, don't fix it. Even though it's not, it doesn't mean it's not broken, but it's still working. Let's just string along as long as we can. It's very easy to start looking at different spaces and go, I wish we could do that. You can take inspiration from it, definitely, but there's not a lot of direct correlation because of the nature of hospitality. It's a special industry. It works very closely with people in a way that the retail industry doesn't. A lot of especially with technology, it's very difficult, frankly, to calculate ROI on a technological change because you're comparing it to how things worked previously. What you're really looking for is stuff that's actually going to add value or reduce friction, both ideally.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talking by Focus on Hospitality. I'm Alessandra Leoni, your host, a former hotel operator, but hospitality passionate at heart, and also head of hospitality for Focus on Hospitality by Focus Group. Today we are talking about something I wanted to discuss for quite a bit of time, and it is why technology changes and fails over time. And it is almost never the technology itself. Thank you to our boss for the studio. Arik, brilliant to have you back on one of our episodes. Would you like, for the people that don't know you, introduce yourself?
Yeah, great to be here. So, hi, I'm Arik. I head up the strategic consulting team at Focus. So it's virtual CIO, virtual CTO, virtual CISO, all those kind of services.
Wonderful. Let's dive straight in today. And let's be very, very direct. In your experience, and I'm not looking for a diplomatic answer here. This is straight talking, so let's be honest and straight. What is the number one reason that technology projects, not just in hospitality perhaps, but in general, but in hospitality sometimes, why they do not deliver what was promised?
It's a great question. I think it's a question I ask myself a lot of the time. So it's basically down to the people more than anything else. And I think that that's not blame in any sense. It's not enough planning or not the right people in the room at the right time. So you have to take people on a journey when you do change, especially in the hotel space, especially any space that involves other people when you're dealing with actual customers that you see face to face. You've already got to take people on that journey with you. And not enough thought is put into what people need, how they work, and what the impact is going to be on the end user, essentially. So I think that is the key thing, is having the right people around the table.
And is how does setting the right strategy and the purpose for that change fits within that? Is sometimes the selection of the technology the issue beside the people as well, and how can we overcome that? Yeah,
so I think again it goes back to it's becoming a bit of a mantra of mine at this point in time, is like, what problem are you trying to solve? I think a lot of business decisions are made, a lot of technological decisions are made for the wrong reason, or for the right intent for the wrong reason, basically. What you're trying to solve is a problem that wasn't actually the problem in the first place. So you really have to understand what's actually going to add real value, where the real problems lie. And if you choose the right technology at that point, things will work. But the other side of this is investment across the business. And I don't necessarily mean monetary investment. It's time investment, it's people investment. It's the idea basically where you can start a technology project and make it the IT people's problem. That's where it kind of goes wrong.
And does the journey start in the right way? I mean, this is the problem. I need to resolve it. Does I go out and search either resources of technology that can support me in that change? Or is sometimes change for the sake of change?
100%. I think that there's, especially I think right now in the age of AI, there's a lot of change for the sake of change. And there's a lot of FOMO. People are just needing to feel like they're doing something. So let's roll out Copilot. Let's hope it works. Let's try Claude. Let's hope it works. Let's try this new agent. Let's hope it works. I think, so there's a thing in the world of technology called the second stage advantage or second place advantage, depending on what you do. And it's this basic principle that those who go first don't necessarily always win. And the idea is basically, it's okay to take a step back and go, well, what is everyone else doing? And let me not lose pace with them, but let me just see what the rest of the world is doing first. I don't have to be the first to market. I can see what everybody else is doing first. And that approach just means you can slow things down a bit and go, okay, that's working, let's try it.
Also, there is an element of aligning yourself with the right partner that has that experience, that delivers that on a daily basis and is able to advise of lesson learned. Because if
100%.
I undertake a project now, I may not have any lesson learned, so I may not know what has worked previously and what doesn't, and what need to change for the same project to be successful. So what do you see? Do you see that happening a lot, and do you feel that businesses are employing the right resources, whether they are internal or externally, in your case?
So I think it's a very fair question. I think the short answer is no, not really, or at least not as often as it should be happening. And I think the key thing is that it's very easy from like a siloing perspective within your organization to go, well, this is our problem, we need to solve it. And we need to solve it alone, and we're not going to ask anybody else for help. So that's the first thing, change that narrative. The idea, again, from hospitality, already any deeply embedded sector like that is like people in that space, unless this is their first job, have worked in other hotels, they've worked in other chains, they've worked in other sectors. They've seen this before. And just asking the question, hey, is this normal? What have you seen before? And I think that goes down to vendor selection. Even before you start looking at partners, start looking at delivery, start looking at products, like, let's discuss this as a group and get everyone's input into it. And then to go to your existing partners, hey, let's discuss this. And you're only really going out to market once you have a really thorough understanding of what the problem is, what you're trying to solve, and is this even a real problem, or is it just the industry?
And obviously, probably if someone that has worked in hospitality for too many years, someone will say, I've seen it happen many, many times. We're probably always the last one to the table, the last one to want to play the game. So there has been this huge drive years ago about, if retail has done it, why can we not do it? So what are some of the biggest lessons that hospitality should learn from other sectors when it comes to change and drive efficiencies and ultimately profitability and more revenue? I mean, there is a huge shift in retail and e-commerce, and that's something probably that hotels are still trying to fix. They have OTAs that deliver the bulk majority of their business at a very high cost. So why retailers perhaps are being so successful and hoteliers some are doing really well, some are still struggling. So what can we learn from other industry that you're seeing? Obviously, Focus is a massive enterprise, and we work across many industries. So what are some of the lessons that we should learn from change?
I mean, I think, and not to sort of counter your point, but I think that it can be very easy for each individual sector to go, we're completely unique, no one's ever had these problems before, we're behind, because it's very easy to feel that way. And the thing is, if you ask someone in retail, they'll say the same thing. You ask someone in banking, they'll say the same thing. It's all down to perception, I think, a lot of time. The reality is, yes, there's been significantly less investment in modernizing the hotel space than there has been in some of the retail spaces and the general industries. Like manufacturing has done huge amounts of work with it because they had to, basically. I think the hotel space hasn't had to yet. Obviously, COVID was a big thing that pushed some innovation in that space. But there's a bit of thing with the world in general and technology, especially if it's working, don't fix it. Even though it's not. It doesn't mean it's not broken, but it's still working. Let's just string along as long as we can. So I think there's definitely looking at what other people are doing. But again, talk to your customers, see what they're seeing, see what they're. It's very easy to start looking at different spaces and go, I wish we could do that. You can take inspiration from it, definitely, but there's not a lot of direct correlation because of the nature of hospitality. It's a special industry. It works very closely with people in a way that the retail industry doesn't. And there's no real other corresponding industry, aside from maybe education, that kind of works that closely. And that's a completely different approach. So I think it's very easy to paint yourself into a corner, but don't panic, don't worry, but focus on your customers, focus on the value.
Let's talk a bit about resistance. And because I think it's one of those things that people do not like to talk about, but is actually very present. What does resistance to technology change actually looks like for hospitality in general, not just hotels, but the broader spectrum of hospitality business? And why does it happen? Probably more in hospitality than other sectors? Yeah,
and I think it goes back to the previous point as well. So I think change is scary. Change is scary for everybody. No one likes change. Even again, as a technologist, my whole career is built on the world is always going to change. And even then I get to the point where this works. It's good enough. I don't need the next big flashy thing. But it's easy to get stuck in that. And from a business perspective, it's easy to see that as that's someone who's blocking you. That's someone who's holding you back. Actually, if you can get the people who have the biggest concerns or the biggest doubts on board, they're your champions. So for me, those are the people, those are the heroes. You focus on them to go, well, you know how this works. the resistance doesn't come. It comes from fear to a certain degree, but especially in the hospitality sector, as I think you said previously, is there's been many changes before. There's many projects before. What's different about this one? The last one we did didn't work, or it almost didn't work. So there's a bit. The longer you stay in any space, the more negativity you build up. It's like, oh, here we go again, another change. So it's how do you win those people? For me, that's the big thing. Win those people, you win the change, basically.
Okay. And what does good change management actually looks like for a hospitality business? Not the theory, because we all set out to do this big change in theory, and on papers everything looks great. But the practical reality of it, who owns it, what does it involve, and how long does it take, and what return am I going to have? Because any change requires, in most cases, investment. With investment comes the need to prove your return to owners, asset managers, etc., etc. So what does that look like?
Yeah, really good question. What I would say with that is that good change isn't measured by when you went live with the change. I think this is the problem a lot of even IT companies make, is like go live is the big thing. We've done the change, now we move on. So for the IT provider, that's easy because we finished, we move on. For the customer and the hotel in this instance, that life goes on after the change. So for me, working as a fractional with the hotel chain, it's 30, 60, 90 days after the change. That's the success measure, because you check in a certain touch points. If a month later, 3 months later, they're still using the system, that's a good change. If they've reverted back to the old system, or their old processes, or they're avoiding it, that's a bad change. So for me, their success is easy. Are they still using it? The ROI, all that stuff comes later, definitely, because that presumably, if the project was sold properly, designed properly, deployed properly, all that stuff's going to be fine. It is going to get ROI. But if they're not using it, you'll never see the ROI.
And do you find when you're having this conversation about designing a change and implementing that change, do you find that ROI expectations are set correctly? Or there is a bit of confusion
I think
what
there's
should
definitely
deliver?
confusion. There's definitely confusion in that space. I think it's people, a lot of especially with technology, it's very difficult, frankly, to calculate ROI on a technological change, because you're comparing it to how things worked previously. But what you're doing is something that's revolutionarily different from what you were doing previously. So how do you compare those two things? And so ROI is different to different people, but what you're really looking for is stuff that's actually going to add value or reduce friction, both ideally. So there was a lot of confusion around basically how am I going to get the value back from this, and it's not always monetary.
Okay. And what is the role of either a general manager or an IT director, depending on the change project? Different stakeholders are going to have different responsibility. But for example, for a GM, what's his role in a major technology change? Because I know from my own experience that the GM's attitudes is the one that set the tone for everything that comes from it.
No, I think so. For me, the GM is the primary customer. From my perspective, they're the people that I need to keep involved, keep invested. My primary stakeholder. I need them invested all the way through a project. Back when I was deploying projects, now that I'm sort of doing transformation lead on this stuff or advising on a business on which direction to go, the GM is at the center of all of that. If the GM loses interest or gets too busy or gets distracted, the whole project is doomed to fail. Basically, they are the pivotal linchpin in everything that happens. They don't have to do everything. But in the same way that they are the center of the hotel, everything runs through them, they're the center of that project as well. And if they're not invested, if they don't have the time, if it doesn't mean something to them, it's not going to work.
We spoke about the 80% is always about people and the 20% is about the technology of the system. And in this case, the change.
Yes.
Disengagement happens quite a lot.
Yes.
Whether it is voluntarily or involuntarily, I don't have time, lack of resources. Have you ever find yourself in a place where you say, you should not do this project? You need this project because you need to fix this problem, you need to evolve your business, but I don't want to do it or we cannot do it because we are not in a position to deliver the results that
completely.
we can.
And actually, and very, very much like your show, the whole point of this basically for me, the point of a fractional consultant is they're in the business with you. They're there to build that trust, build that sort of ownership with you, and build that kind of objective viewpoint. So you brought me in as an external person to advise you, but I am also part of your team. And for me, I'm not doing my job properly if I say, continue that project. There's a right time to say stop. And there's not necessarily no, it's a not yet. And this is the value of that roadmap. By having those initial conversations, mapping out, planning it, it's critical to have that kind of advice to know where you're going from the start. And change management is all part of it. You need to know the direction you're going, why you're doing it, what it's going to solve. And you may just decide, actually, this year, this isn't the project. Maybe that's next year's project. There's some more important stuff to do now. And that's perfectly fine. It's not a failure. It doesn't take any value away from the project. The point is, ideally, stop it before it becomes a failure. Get ahead of it, ideally.
Thank you so much, Arik. Let's talk about different types of people in a hotel team, because you always have your early adopters, you always have your skeptics, you always have people who will go either way depending on what they see around them and how other people are reacting around them. How do you bring all of those people along? And I know communication and early engagement, you and I spoke about it previously, but how you influence the behaviors across different type of personality, different ages and different generations to make the project and the change successful.
Yeah, with great difficulty, I think is the answer. But I think it's in more serious note, I think it is getting to it as soon as you possibly can. The point is basically, so successful change is when people feel invested, feel it's actually going to solve a problem for them. Change for some people almost never works. Like something like 13% of projects that will have forced change work. That only 13%. If you plan it out properly, yeah, even then, still like an 80% success rate. Projects are inherently difficult to do. But the point of a project should be, especially a change project, is bringing people along from the start. Not so much, here's an idea we've had. Again, you're already on the back foot. If you have an idea about how to change, at a senior level, how to change the hotel, you start with the staff. You start with the customers. What needs to be changed? And you feed that back up to the board, and the board's deciding direction, but they're not coming up with the idea. It should be coming bottom up, basically.
And when you look at a change, it's is there where it comes from or where it should lead to? Does it affect the cost that is involved, or is the cost element should be pivotal to what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think you can't get away from costs. I mean, for me, I think when you talk about technology, you talk about strategy, especially. If you're talking about money at any given point, that you've almost lost it already. You have to start from the value it's going to deliver, the impact it's going to have on the business. And yes, the cost is unavoidable, but it should pay for itself if it's a good change. There should be ROI if it's a good change. If it isn't, probably not worth doing unless you have to do it. So you've taken over a chain, they're in disrepair, you've got to, yes, but the ROI is going to be in 2-3 years time where it's done, it's paying for itself. So if it's not going to have ROI, the ROI comes from a good change, not the other way around.
Okay. Let's move back to the people element. Training is such a big part of it, because with change comes training the people that with the new system, with the new process, etc. And yet is often the things that get cut or rushed through when projects run over budget or over time. What's the cost of not training, bad training, or not planning that element of the change well?
Yeah, I mean, project's failure, that's the cost base. But worse than that, basically, because again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier on, is like the thing to remember with people in hospitality, they tend to stay in hospitality for quite a long time. People move around, sure, but people who do stay for a very, very long time, and they remember. People have memory. They go from hotel chain to hotel chain, branch to branch, and they pick up that this thing didn't work before. And what you want to be is the chain that breaks that, be the hotel that breaks that model and gets them involved from the start. The difficulty with that is, I think, the concept of training is always seen as something you do after the change rather than something you do before the change. And the principle is, if you brought people along for that journey, they knew it was coming, they've been pre-trained, their first day, they use the system. What you're trying to avoid is, again, what I said earlier, the 30, 60, 90, where that you sit down with them a month later and they've already lost interest. By month 2, they're starting to fall back to the old system. Month 3, they've forgotten the new system even existed. And you can't rely on training people on go live day. It has to be months before it becomes part of their DNA, part of the way they work, part of the way they function. And that works if they've been involved in the change, if they bought into the change, if they sold you the change. That's what you really want, is like, I really need this change to make my life better. There you go, you've got it. Fantastic, I'll do my job better now.
Great. And how do you actually measure where the technology, where a technology change has landed well, not just that it's gone live, but that it generally changed behaviors, processes, and in operation, as well as what it delivers to ultimately to a guest?
I think for me, and generally something I have conversations with my customers all the time on is when I come back in at that 1 month, 2 month, 3 month period after the change. If it's still in use, they're still using it, that's positive to me. That is a proof that the change has worked. Either that or it's a very demoralized workforce that would just do anything they're told, but that's quite rare, to be frank. It's usually that if they're still doing it and they're doing it the way that they were trained to do it, it's worked and it's actually made a real value, and you can see it in the way they operate. If they're not, we just roll it back and rethink it.
Okay. What is the difference between the hotel that comes out of a big change process, a lot stronger, more confident, more capable, and the one that actually regretted?
It's a tough one.
Well, there are many cases,
Yeah.
there are many hotel companies that
Yeah.
change, not the focus type of technology, but there is a lot of change in terms of PMS, booking journeys, the
Yeah.
hotel tech stack and ecosystem. So our technology, we focus tends to be in the work that we do, that you do very well. It's more the unseen one.
Yeah.
So, and hotels tend to be very proactive into the hotel ecosystem side, and our kind of tech, the foundation that actually allows everything else to work, sits there, sometimes disregarded. So I've done it both ways, and I've learned the hard way, I should say, where the team manager wasn't in the room. I've done a PMS change, whether the people element, etc., we thought was successful or not, but definitely we had an additional layer into if the foundation was not correct.
Yeah. No, I think you've got a point there. I think it does. It does very much go down to the foundations, and you can tell any business that's done change well because they're still using the change for a start. But you see it in the way they work with customers. You see it in the way the customers talk about the business, and it's very easy to do. It's like a trust pilot before and after, or just a general sense of you can feel the difference in a business that's just been through something positive and a business that's either been through several negative things or they're just kind of stuck. I think for me it goes back to value. Is the change going to add value? Is it adding value? Has it saved time? Is that time being used appropriately? Do customers feel that this is a better experience than the last time they came? I think all of that's part of a positive change. Whatever that change was, even if the change is just the Wi-Fi changing, Wi-Fi is a big part of hotels, and it doesn't get seen as that way, but it's the cornerstone of all the communication, from the door entry systems to me watching the TV to the billing systems. It's all part of that process, basically. So if that's working, well, for me, again, it's invisibility. It all comes down to invisibility. A good change is invisible change. Good technology is invisible technology. If I have to think about it at all, and as a technologist, if I have to think about it at all, it's already failed. It should just be completely invisible, and then it's working.
And in the conversation that you have with customers, do you find that in most cases the change is led by the top, or is the top seeking the change because he has been requested or initiated from the bottom?
More often the former, I think. I think it should be more the latter, but it's difficult because what you want at the top is people who see the future, who see the vision, who have got an idea of where they want to take the hotel. So you want that idea, like, I want to do new and interesting things. But what you don't want to do is be the one dictating that solution, basically. And I put this into like the fractional consultancy piece as well. When I talk to clients, it's not about telling them what they need to do. And leadership is all about listening, not speaking. The point is basically almost like from a doctor's perspective, and it's the way I sell fractional stuff as a side note with that, but it's the way I think a leadership team should be selling the fractional stuff, their services back to the business, essentially, is what problem you're trying to solve. But that side is like, it's looking from like a doctor's perspective, if that makes sense. And the way I think about it is like, if you walk into a doctor's surgery and you've got a limp, the doctor doesn't go, there's a problem with your leg. They ask you, what happened? Where's it hurt? What have you tried? And it's about dissecting that down. So I know that there's a problem because you've come into the room. I know that there's a problem with this business because I run a business. But I don't understand what the solution is. I need the people in the business. I need the patient to tell me what the problem is. And the patient in this case is the customer and the staff on the ground. So why would I dictate or prescribe the solution to them? I know something needs fixing, but I don't know what it is. So I need them to help me work out what that is. And then together, they bought in because they fed in the solution. I bought in because I paid for the solution. But I get the change I wanted to see, which is happier workforce, happier customers, more ROI.
Technology has evolved massively over the past, let's say, 7 years, at a much faster, accelerated pace than in the previous 7 years, for example. Has that led to more changes needed? because technology has changed?
Yes, I think change compounds. So IT changes especially compound on previous ones, and there are waves with technology. So what you tend to find if you're a hotel or any business basically that stayed on the cusp of technology, the leap to the next one is much less. If you miss a leap, you've got to further leap the next one, and the further you fall behind in terms of that investment in Wi-Fi, that foundational technology, your data being stored in an appropriate way, in an accessible way, the systems within the hotel, the further you fall behind, the more expensive it's going to be to replace it down the line. So change can be very, very painful and very expensive at that point in time. So, yeah.
So in that case, you mentioned earlier about change that needs to happen, and when that is because there has been a change in the regulation, so the compliance and security element has to change, so you are forced to do a change project for those reasons. So is everybody keep up with that, and how can they keep up with technology that is evolving at such a pace that it keeps forcing change into the regulation? So what is it, a domino effect? And
it is.
You find that industries and businesses have the skill set?
No, they definitely don't. But I think, again, what I would say is so looking at AI as an example, but whether it's cloud, whether it's AI, whether it's the general, like that digital transformation of moving away from paper to data, the legislation and compliance rules haven't really changed that drastically. We've always been responsible for people's data. GDPR has been a thing for quite a while now. None of the stuff is new necessarily, but I think we've been quite conservative with how we've applied the legislation. Like, okay, well, that doesn't really apply to me right now because all my stuff's local, so it's secure enough. I think it's very easy to kind of fall out of step with things, and then the longer you leave it, the worse it gets. It is a simple version of that. But I think as any business, it is the difficulty isn't so much that. The difficulty is working out which change you have to do now, which bit can wait, because sometimes you've got a vendor pushing you to do Wi-Fi upgrades, but the Wi-Fi works. It works. No one's complaining about it. It just seems to work. Like the fact that it's on a slightly older system is maybe less secure. It works. I'll worry about that next year, and next year becomes the year after, becomes the year after, becomes the year after. So it's a slippery slope to kind of fall into, and it's unfair on businesses and hotels especially. I know to say, well, you have to keep pace, but you have to keep pace.
Well, we were able to build a hotel, put the system in a cupboard, and really sweat those assets. I mean, you're talking hotels have PBX machines into the comms rooms that have been sitting there for 25 years. So now PSTN switch off is forcing people into a change, into an upgrade, into an investment. With technology changing so much faster, how is it possible to measure, to pace that investment to ensure that you can continue to change at the pace which it will be needed? Because technology is evolving, that compliance may be evolving alongside, and security will evolve definitely alongside. So how can I, as a GM or as a finance director or an IT director, budget for that change consistently? When we install a phone system, we were sweating it for so many years, so you get that return on that investment. But now with the change, how can we keep up with time? Because those changes will be also needed by the teams and by the guest, because everything is more instant all the time. So everything is, why do I need to do this manually? Why can it just magically appear on my phone, on my device, etc.? So how can we cope with that pace of change that will be required, not only from a people perspective, which is one of the biggest barrier, like you mentioned earlier, people adoption and people really buying into the change, but the level of investment, is it becoming cheaper?
So yes and no. So I think with inflation, it's hard to tell sometimes, but I think technology is more accessible than it's ever been before. It's more available. There's more options than there's ever been before. Is it cheaper? Not necessarily. I think the barrier to entry is lower. If you're going to start a hotel today and fully kit it out with technology, it does cost considerably less than it would have done 10, 20 years ago. But the level of technology you need to put in there, the level of compliance you'd have to do, that hotel 10, 20 years ago didn't have to do that. So that kind of tips the scale a bit slightly. I think in terms of a budgetary perspective, always, but I would say factor in little and often. This is where the road mapping comes in place. Rather than I'm buying this phone system, I don't have to worry about it now for another 7 years. factor in that you might need to replace it in year 5. And if you don't have to, fantastic. But budget for that in advance. Plan for like one small change quite often, one medium change every now and then, and one long big scale change every few years. Like have that kind of logic in mind where it's easier said than done, I know, but that way you don't get surprised by, oh no, we now have to replace the entire IT system 10 years in.
So obviously, as a hotelier, there is a cost per room per month. Any system, generally is a per room per month cost, whether it's a PMS, booking engines maybe on a commission percentage or on a per reservation, a nominal fee, etc. So we're moving more and more, like you said, it costs a lot less to put it in when you build a hotel, because there are a lot of, everything is cloud now, so we no longer need that clunky big comms room where you stack up the racks and millions of feet of cabling, in the patching, etc. So that has become cheaper, but with that comes more of a pay-as-you-go model, like a licensing module. So when you get over the initial investment and it's easier to start, your operational cost increases, both from a telephony perspective, a IT support perspective, licenses. Before you could log in, everyone used to log in reception at Hotel X. Now every user, for full compliance, need to have a license, and it's a phone license, it's a Microsoft license, and God forbid you give them Copilot to do their job better. So all of this piles up. So, and that cost cannot be picked up by the guest, because the rates that we can charge the guest.
Exactly.
Where can we let off? When been talking to hoteliers in roundtables for a year now, and the theme is the same. Even if we want to do change and we can seek the investment, the operational cost is rising so much alongside everything else. Forget business rates, forget. So where it can remain profitable from a technology perspective, and know the new technology and the change in technology.
No, I think it's a challenge. I think obviously every business is facing right now, but hospitality especially, it's a big thing. I think, and it's one of those things again where it's looking at technologies that actually make a real difference to the guests, that make a real difference to the staff. It's not flashy extras that aren't necessarily needed. I mean, do you need, again, a simple thing which lots of hotel chains have already done is like, do you need satellite TV in every single room? No, because people are going to bring their own laptops to their own Netflix. So give them a screen, give them a cable, give them a Chromecast or something to project to. They're going to bring their own Netflix. You don't have to provide the entertainment. So it's looking at ways like, how do we use the technology to do, this should be a home away from home. They're going to bring their home with them. Mm-hmm. So assume that and make sure you counter that. So it's technology that add to that are what you keep. Everything else is not necessary. I think it maybe sounds a bit like a budget sort of hotel concept, but it's the sound concept basically. It's like, what do they need in that room, and then go a little bit above that. And there's loads of customer feedback that you can get from people and what we like to see, what works, what doesn't work. Mm-hmm. If the basics are right, it's a good, safe, comfortable place. Everything I need is in there. That's what people want.
And you and I spoke about the complexity and the fragmentation of so many more vendors having coming into the marketplace with new gadget, with new widget, with new solution, with the next shiny silver bullet kind of thing. Does it exist already? Are people looking at what they actually have in the essential infrastructure?
It's a short version.
And understanding that perhaps you already have capability for automation. Do you need to outsource it somewhere else, because it's possible within your Microsoft infrastructure to do that? And how many are realizing what they already have before making the next expenditure?
Yeah, and I think it's a very fair question. I think not enough people ask it. I think part of my role when I come into an environment is I look at what they have already, how it all interacts, what they've got. And a key thing with that is basically, are you using what you have to the best advantage? And 9 times out of 10, and I've had conversations with someone, going back to your Copilot comment, where I'll say, look, have you guys tried Copilot? And I'll tell them all about it. And they go, oh yeah, well, we could just get that from our IT provider. And like, well, did you ask your IT provider for this? Like, oh, no, but they haven't mentioned it. Okay, well, go ask them for it. And my job is very much like, I'm not here to sell solutions to you, but I'm here to tell you that there are things out in the world. Just because there's some new flashy vendor, as you say, that's going to sell you that silver bullet or that magic box in the corner, your current supply chain probably already has that. And entirely possible you bought it 2 years ago and just haven't used it properly. It's not configured properly. You didn't pay for the premium model, whatever it's going to be, you already have the foundations in place, probably. And if you don't, to be frank, that new flashy thing isn't going to work anyway, because you probably need the foundations that you didn't invest in 2-3 years ago. So go back to basics of what's it actually going to solve, what's it going to do, who's it going to help.
So people are watching, whether they are hotel operators, hotel owners, hospitality venues. If they're about to kick off a significant change, or they have that idea in their head, what you tell them to do before you start?
I mean, something is just challenge your preconceptions about it. So where's that change come from, basically? Is it come from looking outside the sector? Nothing wrong with that. Validate it with the team, validate it with your consumers as much with the customers as much as you possibly can. Check it with the board. See where that change has come from. Because again, if it's not going to solve a real problem, you're wasting your own time, you're wasting the organization's money, and you're wasting your customers' goodwill on trying new things that aren't necessarily going to make a difference to them. Customers know what they want, and the hospitality is about listening to what the customers want.
Well, Arik, this has been such an important conversation, especially in the time that we find ourselves in, with technology evolving, AI not coming, but being here, and so much more that is going on, not just for hospitality, but every sector, I guess. So I'm so glad that we were able to speak from the heart. So technology does not change organizations. That one of the points that we made. People do,
yes.
And that's the foundation of hospitality, is made for people, by people that deliver great hospitality. And in hospitality, where everything runs on human connection, that is truer than anywhere else, probably. I hope this episode has given our audience food for thoughts, and has given a different way of thinking about your next technology project, one that starts with the team, one that starts with planning, and not the new shiny system. Thank you so much, Arik Fletcher, for joining me today. That was exactly the kind of conversation I wanted to have. Honest, direct, and genuinely useful. Arik, you were brilliant, and I hope to do this again about something that is just as impactful as the one we have had today. If you have enjoyed this episode, please do follow Focus on Hospitality on LinkedIn, and do share this video with a colleague so they can learn from it and give us their insight as well. Please do let me know what you think, and let me know what you like to talk about next. We do listen, and so I can bring the conversation on something that you want to know about back to you. Thank you very much for listening, and until next time, keep talking straight, and thank you for being with us today. That's it for this episode of Straight Talking by Focus on Hospitality.